My Hero Academia Chapter 248, one by one. So we got another shorter chapter this week, still focusing on Endeavor training the big three. And I got a few things to speculate about, namely with Bakugo and Todoroki's power-ups, or at least future power-ups. So let's get into it. So we see them chasing down like this Sonic the Hedgehog-looking dude on a bike, and Endeavor, of course, gets there before they are able to, and he says that they're too slow. So essentially, they're trying to fix their overall speed, or at least specifically the speed of Bakugo and Todoroki, and I think that's the main power-ups that they're going to be getting. But given the context and the examples that are pointed out in this chapter, for example, like Todoroki, when he says, see, the fire was shooting out of his feet whenever he accelerated. I'm not sure if you saw it before, but when he used the jet burn back in his fight against the high-end Nomu, it was most likely done by compressing those flames to heighten his acceleration. So that's likely what's going to be going on with these two. Now, for Bakugo, as it's also pointed out, that he can already do like his AP shot, which he developed for the provisional license exam, I think, somewhere around that time. And it's kind of the same fundamental as the jet burn, but of course, not nearly as powerful as that is. So instead of just using that as an attack and having to think about it and focus on it, essentially what Endeavor wants Bakugo to do here is to develop that into a propulsion type of ability, like use it for utility rather than just offense, because that seems to be one of Bakugo's drawbacks here. He has great mobility, as stated, like he can move around super well, he's very agile, has great reflexes, but his mobility, his speed in that aspect is lacking. So if he can somehow use like an AP shot type propulsion, then he can get on the level of Endeavor and move kind of like him and get from point A to point B much faster, because he also points out that like if you're not fast enough, it's not just a detriment to you, but you're costing literal lives in the process because you're not getting to a situation quick enough. So as for Shoto, he still has good mobility with his ice and the way that he uses to navigate it. Probably not as mobile as Bakugo or as good and agile as he is, but no slouch. I mean, they are the big three for a reason, and compared to Endeavor, they are still slow. And it seems that Shoto is probably the slowest of the three. At least right now it seems to be that way, because he doesn't really have good propulsion. He kind of just relies on that ice path that he makes. And we saw back in the recommendation exam that he had with Yaorashi, he was slower than him, but Yaorashi has wind on his side. So along with Bakugo not being exactly the fastest in the race departments, like when we saw when they were doing those initial tests with Aizawa, like back in Season 1, Bakugo wasn't the fastest on those tests either, so I think that might be a callback to that. But Endeavor essentially wants Shoto to not have to rely on his ice path, or that to be like his main method of mobility. So I'm sure this is pointing to Shoto having a propulsion similar to that of Endeavor. You know, also as they pointed out earlier, he's shooting the fire from his feet. And Endeavor later on says storage and release, the condensation of power, the ability to momentarily draw forth your maximum power, or alternatively, the ability to focus your power on a single point. And we know that Shoto, of course, only has one side, fire, not whole body control like Endeavor does. So it's going to be a little more difficult for him, but he can do something, and it will be difficult since he has like one leg. And you know, when you see like a jet or something, it needs to have like two engines or two little turbines to balance it out. So he'll have to figure out a way to balance it so that he's not like shooting awkwardly or jutting in one direction. But also he can probably use his fire and ice in tandem, you know, as we've seen him use with his flash freeze heat wave. So maybe he could do something like that from a utility standpoint. Instead of just making a huge like gust of air, ultra blast, superheated blast thing, he can use it as propulsion. So he can create like a mini little superheated blast, and that propels himself. And then imagine how fast he would be after that. I think that's a really good possibility of what we could see from Shoto in the future. But for now, he's definitely just going to focus on his fire propulsion, because even Endeavor says it's like, you know, try focusing your mental image of shaping your ice and applying it to your fire. So he's going to figure out how to do that, and I'm sure it will take him in a faster direction, as you know, the fire and the propulsion is much better than that of ice and whatnot. And then as for Izuku, he's kind of putting the black whips to the side here, so it doesn't look like we're going to be getting that upgrade, at least soon. the whole thing that I theorized in the previous review where he's going to use Air Force to propel his black whip and make that like a projectile type attack. Essentially like a way more powerful Air Force, which could have a utility aspect to it where he can like latch on to things or like grab somebody with it or just straight up impale somebody. But it seems like he's just going to be mastering his Air Force, at least in this training or over this past week, because we're going to find out later on that 1 week has passed since the events of this chapter. So I guess Izuku's just going to like subconsciously be able to use the Air Force because he says that he still has to think about it in order to use it. So he's just trying to get to the point where he just blasts it off, no problem. Kind of like how he's doing full cowling right now. He doesn't really have to think about it. He can just snap right into it. So he'll be able to snap into his Air Force after this. And once he's mastered that, then he says add on a third thing. So maybe it's just going to be building blocks here. Once he's able to just effortlessly do the Air Force, then after that, we're going to get the Black Whip Air Force technique. That's going to be pretty cool once he's able to pull that off. But then as we come to the end of the chapter, we see Fuyumi calling Endeavor and saying that like, hey, I heard you're working with Shoto and his friends, and I was thinking that since school's starting again, you should all come over and I'll make dinner for everyone. So this is going to be like a fun little thing. We're going to see like Bakugo, Shoto, and Izuku all at dinner with Endeavor and Fuyumi, and maybe Natsuo's there too. Or maybe even Rei. Maybe she shows up. Probably not, but we'll see what happens with that. But I do think there's going to be a big revelation at this dinner, because we've seen in the past 2 chapters that Fuyumi has seemed like really sad. For some reason, I don't know why, but she's really seems solemn. And obviously there's a reason to that, since it's foreshadowing something. So either something has already happened and she's going to reveal it at this dinner, that's why she wants to see him, or something will happen and maybe we're just seeing the past still, possibly, or remains to be seen. But there will be some significance to this next chapter and the dinner that they're going to have here. But then unfortunately we were going on break next week, so that's fine. Maybe Horikoshi really needs the break. I mean, I think these chapters have been short and sweet for a reason. Maybe he's working on something, maybe he needs a break or something. But other than that, if you like the review, guys, please give it a like. I also have a Patreon. It gives you access to a weekly Q&A. And if you haven't already, please subscribe as well. Have a great day. See you in the next one.